Hey everyone, it's Heather Nichols, and today I have a card to share with you that's perfect for the fall season. It all starts with the Fall Foliage Stamp and Stencil combo set. There's a red rubber background and then stencils to create a colorful background of fall colored leaves. To hold my stencils in place while I'm creating my project, I'll be using Pixie Spray. I'll also be using the smaller square in the Masking Squares stencil set. I'll be using the Grateful for You sentiment in the Handlettered Thanksgiving stamp set, as well as the coordinating die. And then for ink, I'll be using chocolate truffle, toffee, sweet potato pie and pumpkin, candy corn and pineapple, olive and avocado. I'll also be using my blender brushes to coordinate with my ink colors. For a liquid adhesive, I'll be using multi-medium matte. I have sugar cube ink refill and chocolate truffle liquid watercolor along with a water brush to add spatters, and I'll be also using some foam squares to pop a few things up on my project. Let's start this off with the background stamp. I'm going to set this up in my MISTI, and the stamp will stamp the leaf veins as well as a few speckles and polka dots between the different leaf shapes. I'll set that up in my MISTI, close the lid to pick it up, and then I'm inking up my stamp with chocolate truffle ink. I'll stamp this onto the grid paper inside the MISTI so I can use that as a guide as to where I'm going to place my cardstock in my MISTI to stamp the image onto it. I'll add a little bit of adhesive to the grid paper where the image is going to stamp. I'll set my cardstock in there and that adhesive will hold it in place. Then I'll ink up my stamp with chocolate truffle ink and stamp it onto the Toffee cardstock. There are 3 different stencils that coordinate with the stamped background. Each of the stencils has a different shape of leaf, and you can stencil these in different colors or however you want to try out. On the stencils, there are etched veins, and you can line these up with the veins on the stamped image. Make sure your cardstock is going the right direction and just lay it over the top and line that up with the stamped veins underneath. Look in the window openings of the leaves just to kind of gauge if anything looks off, and then you might just have to slide that stencil a little bit to line up those etched veins so everything is lined up perfectly. For this first leaf shape, I'll be using my blender brush along with avocado ink, and I will just add ink to my blender brush and then use my blender brush in a circular motion over the top of my stencil to color in the leaves. To add some shading, after I add the avocado ink, I will be using just the tip of my blender brush and picking up some olive ink, and I'm adding that right to the base of the different leaves on the stencil design. Once I'm done adding the greens, I will take the stencil off, and then I can add the next stencil and line up the veins to start adding the second color. On this next stencil, I'll be adding pineapple ink and then doing my shading with candy corn ink. I'll line up this last stencil with the leaf veins that are etched onto it with the leaf veins that are stamped underneath. Once I get that in place, I will add color to the leaves using sweet potato pie for the main color and adding shading with pumpkin ink. Removing that stencil after adding that third color reveals the gorgeous leaf-covered background that is just perfect for fall projects. Next, I'll be using the smaller square stencil from the Masking Stencils Squares set. I'm going to create an area for my sentiment to sit on the card. The background's pretty busy, so doing this will create a little bit more of a neutral area so my sentiment won't get lost. I'll line that up with the guides on the stencil. I have Pixie Spray on the back to hold everything in place. And then I'll use my blender brush with toffee colored ink to add the color into the opening on the stencil. I'll also use just a little bit of chocolate truffle ink and ink blend that right around the outside edge of the square to define the edges and just make it pop a little bit more on the card. I'm adding a few splatters to my project using chocolate truffle liquid watercolor along with sugar cube ink refill. I'll add a drop of each of these to an acrylic block, and then I'll use a water brush to pick them up and tap the brush over my finger to add the different colors of splatters to my project. For the sentiment on my card, I'm using the Grateful for You from the Hand-Lettered Thanksgiving stamp set. I'm setting this up on my MISTI to stamp on a piece of sugar cube cardstock using chocolate truffle ink. I'll place the stamp into my MISTI, close the lid to pick it up, ink up the stamp, and then close the lid of the MISTI to stamp the sentiment onto the sugar cube cardstock. I'll cut out the sentiment with the coordinating die. I'm lining that up and I'll hold that in place with a little bit of removable tape, and then I'll send that through my die cut machine. I'll also cut 2 additional die cuts from the same die, and I'm going to stack those up so that my sentiment pops up just a little bit more on my project. Okay, I'm ready to put this card together. I'm attaching the background to a sugar cube card base. I'm just adding adhesive to the back, and I added a little bit of stitching to the bottom of my background, and I'll just tuck the threads behind so that they're secure. I'll use liquid adhesive to attach the 3 die cut pieces together and stack them up for my project. I'll make sure that the stamp sentiment is on the top. I'll add my sentiment to my card front right in that area where I stenciled the square with the Masking Stencils square stencil. Off camera, I did another background with the Fall Foliage Stampin' Stencil set. I did it on sugar cube cardstock, and then I used some scissors to cut out a few of the leaves. I'll use foam squares to pop these leaves up around my sentiment on my card. I hope you enjoyed this fall card that I created with the Fall Foliage Stampin' Stencil combo set, and I hope you learned something new. You can find the supplies to create this project in the Tailored Expressions web store at tailoredexpressions.com. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody, and I'll see you next time.